You may remember back in April I had a chat with a nice man called Matt Tays, who's the Chief Technology Officer at a Canadian geothermal energy company called Eavor. That video and that technology attracted quite a lot of interest in you good folks out there, and it also prompted a good number of you to suggest that I take a look at another promising potential geothermal market disruptor that coincidentally was also already on my radar. That company is called QUAISE Energy, based in Boston, Massachusetts. They reckon they've developed a new technology to massively improve the efficiency of geothermal drilling and significantly increase the depth that drilled boreholes can reach. We're talking potentially harvesting slightly mind-boggling amounts of energy from extremely hot rock formations that lie almost 20 kilometres or 13 miles beneath our feet. So how on earth do they reckon they can do that? Hello and welcome to Just Have a Think. I think it's fair to say there's a bit of a buzz around geothermal energy at the moment. Theoretically, it's an effectively inexhaustible source of energy, producing no greenhouse gases or pollutants at the point of use. And when I say inexhaustible, it really is worth taking a moment to consider the scale we're talking about here. The core of our planet has a temperature somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 degrees Celsius. And according to this article in New Scientist, there's enough heat just in the upper 3 kilometres of crust to satisfy the entire world's energy demands many thousands of times over. Our planet is continuously radiating heat out from the core, partly as a result of the friction and gravitational pull generated when Earth was formed billions of years ago, but largely because of the decay of radioactive isotopes like potassium-40 and thorium-232. That release of energy will continue for a few billion more years. As long as we humans manage our energy harvesting wisely and only draw heat off at a rate that can be replenished by surrounding rock, then geothermal power plants could be run for decades or even centuries. And unlike other renewable energy sources, geothermal systems are generally capable of providing baseload power generation. In other words, they can potentially produce electricity or heat 24/7 without any dependence on the sun or the wind. The energy crisis, driven largely by events in Ukraine, has obviously disrupted global energy supplies, and of course our rapidly warming climate is making it more urgent than ever to find clean and sustainable sources of energy. So geothermal energy ticks a lot of boxes and really does look like a promising solution. The challenge is accessing as much energy as possible at the lowest cost and with the least amount of environmental disruption. The Eavor system is certainly one of the most promising ways to achieve that goal, and it's probably worth a very quick recap of how their technology works. Unlike the traditional approach to geothermal energy, which is to find an already existing hot permeable aquifer underground, drill down to it and pump that hot water back up to the surface, Eavor create their own closed loop system with a working fluid circulating through a set of continuous boreholes drilled down into deep hot rock. The fluid is forced back up to the surface as a result of a natural thermosiphon, driven simply by the difference in density between cold water entering the system and warm water coming out. That means there's no need for an electrically powered pumping system, which is what makes up a large part of the cost of existing geothermal technology. There's also none of the fracking or seismic activity associated with so-called enhanced geothermal technology, which essentially uses the same destructive machinery as the US shale industry. Eavor relies on heat from the surrounding rock transferring into the fluid via conduction. Their system has been carefully calibrated to allow each wellbore to operate at around 100% of maximum heat availability for at least 30 years, with only a very minimal drop-off of 0.2% after that point has been passed. In theory, that means a well-maintained installation could still be happily generating useful baseload energy for a century or more. For a much fuller explanation direct from CTO Matt Tays, you can click up there to jump back to the interview I conducted with him earlier in the year. So what about QUAISE Energy then? Is it a competitor for Eavor, or could we possibly have two complementary technologies here? These guys actually emerged as a startup company out of MIT. Now, I've become acutely aware over the years that for many of you good folks out there, just the mention of MIT immediately starts to ring alarm bells. The institute is full of bright young things constantly coming up with all sorts of genius ideas that work beautifully in their lovely laboratories, but often not so well in the real world. The technology being developed at QUAISE exists because a research engineer called Paul Voskov, who was working at MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Centre a few years ago, accidentally vaporised a large hole in one of the walls of his lab. Now, for normal folks like you and me, vaporising a wall in your workplace would probably constitute at least a final written warning. But for the folks at MIT, it was apparently a joyous breakthrough. Quite literally. What Voskov had happened upon was a way of creating very high power millimetre wave energy in something called a gyrotron, which is essentially a bit like a microwave on steroids, driving something called a maser, which is essentially a laser on steroids. Think of it as the sort of thing that Darth Vader would have had in the armoury on the Death Star. Anyway, used responsibly, QUAISE reckon this device can focus energy into a beam that can vaporise rocks to create boreholes several miles deep, all nicely sealed up with vitrified walls. The idea is to first use conventional drilling technology to get down to about 3,000 metres where the basement rock is. That technology is of course widely used in the oil and gas industry, which by the way is why there's such a lot of interest and investment from fossil fuel companies into geothermal energy in general. It could genuinely represent a transition technology that salvages hundreds of thousands of jobs and allows them to utilise a great deal of their existing infrastructure. Anyway, after 3 kilometres, QUAISE deploys the gyrotron to send their high power millimetre waves plus high pressure gas down the borehole to start vaporising the deeper layers of rock. The ash that's created in the process is shoved back up to the surface by the gas. In traditional drilling, the deeper you go, the tougher it gets. So far the industry record is a depth of just over 12 kilometres, which in itself is an astonishing achievement. But QUAISE claim their technology can keep going deeper and deeper without losing any of its destructive power, all the way down to 20 kilometres, where the temperature of the rock can reach more than 500 degrees Celsius, which for you imperial types is almost 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the inlet and outlet bores have been created, pressurised water can be sent down to the depths to absorb all that energy before being brought back up again as steam that could drive turbines to generate electricity. QUAISE say their goal is to send that steam into existing fossil fuel fired power plants, eliminating the requirement for coal or gas, and thereby enabling a much faster energy transition using existing facilities all over the world. And from a technical point of view, there's no real reason why their technology couldn't be used to provide deep boreholes for the Everloop system I mentioned earlier. Of course, that would require a calm and rational discussion and negotiation between 2 commercial North American operators. So while I won't exactly be holding my breath for a joint venture to emerge in the coming years, you never know, eh? Arguably the much more important question for QUAISE Energy though is whether you'll be seeing one of their gyrotron machines burning deep holes into a plot of land near you anytime soon. And here's where we arrive at the now very well trodden crystal ball territory. I can certainly show you the proposed timeline outlined at the QUAISE Energy website. According to that, the first full-scale demo rig should be up and running by 2024. The first operational systems boasting generating capacities of 100 megawatts are planned to come online a couple of years later, and the first fossil fuel fired power plant could be repurposed to use supercritical water vapour from a 20-kilometre deep QUAISE borehole before the end of this decade. Doable? Realistic? Who knows, to be honest, but QUAISE are backed by $70 million of seed funding from these organisations, and they're committed to the long term, as QUAISE co-founder and CEO Carlos Araque pointed out in this recent interview.
About this. But indeed, you have to find investors that are willing to take on the long term. Right? So the investors we have are committed. They are mission driven to climate change, and they will invest over 5-10-year horizons.
Mm-hmm. So I think for now, the best we can do is keep our fingers crossed for QUAISE Energy and put them on our list of companies to come back and review in a year to 18 months' time. It does look very likely though that geothermal energy will play an increasingly important role in the energy transition. Will it become just another cog in an ever more complicated sustainable energy system, or could it genuinely be a global game changer? Well, the energy is certainly there for the taking. There's literally hundreds of thousands of times more energy down there than our species could ever come close to knocking a dangerous dent in. Someone will get there, I'm quite sure of that. The question is, who will it be? And will any of those competitors be smart enough to collaborate for the greater good of humanity? I'm an optimist by nature, so I certainly hope so. But what's your view? Exciting prospect or total pipe dream? Why not jump down to the comment section below and let me know. That's it for this week though. Thanks as always to our Patreon supporters who help keep the channel completely independent and keep ads and sponsorship messages out of all my videos. And I must just give a quick shout out to some folks who've joined recently with pledges of $10 or more a month. They are Andrew Cornwall, good to meet you the other day Andrew, Raymond Ashtrew, Graham Abbray, Peter Urban, Gary George, KN, John Wren, Pete Sloan, Laura Rithig, Todd Quinn and Rolly at Trail of Fears. And of course a huge thank you to everyone else who's joined since last time too. If you'd like to get involved with all that, then why not head over to patreon.com/justhavathink to find out about all the exclusive stuff you can take part in there. And you can hugely support me right here on YouTube absolutely for free by subscribing and hitting that like button. It's dead easy to do that. You just need to click down there or on that icon there. As always, thanks very much for watching. Have a great week and remember to just have a think. See you next week.